Marcus Rivera was having a perfectly ordinary Tuesday, which in retrospect should have been his first warning sign. He was sitting in the parking lot behind his office building, unwrapping what could generously be called a sandwich, when the sky suddenly developed a case of the sparkles and a beam of light decided his Honda Civic was the perfect landing pad. One moment, he was contemplating whether the mystery meat in his lunch was actually edible. The next he was standing in what looked like the universe's most expensive game show set, complete with holographic confetti and enough neon lighting to power a small city. "Greetings, primitive creature," boomed a voice that sounded like it had been run through a vocoder and a blender. "I am Zephron Glitterwing, Supreme Entertainment Coordinator of the Galactic Broadcasting Consortium." Marcus blinked at the creature addressing him. Zephron looked like someone had crossed a peacock with a used car salesman and given the result a serious case of main character syndrome. Iridescent feathers sprouted from his elongated head, and his smile revealed far too many teeth that were far too white. "You have been selected for the honor of participating in our most popular reality program, the Ultimate Primitive Challenge." Zephron gestured dramatically with arms that had too many joints. 30 days of survival using only your natural abilities. No technology, no assistance, no modern conveniences of any kind. Marcus said, still holding half a sandwich. "Can I finish lunch first?" Zephron's smile faltered for exactly 0.3 seconds before snapping back to maximum wattage. Such delightful humor from the human specimen. "Now, let me introduce your fellow contestants." The first contestant looked like someone had asked a 5-year-old to design the scariest bug possible, then given it a gym membership. Krax the Destroyer stood 7 feet tall with chitinous armor that gleamed under the studio lights. His mandibles clicked ominously as he flexed claws that could probably open cans. "I shall crush all opposition beneath my mighty pincers," Krax declared, striking a pose that belonged on a protein powder advertisement. The second contestant was Nimble, a rabbit-like creature whose fur changed colors based on her anxiety level. Currently she was cycling through approximately 17 different shades of panic. Oh dear, 30 days without technology. What if there are predators? What if it rains? What if the food is poisonous? What if? And finally Zephron interrupted before Nimble could work herself into a full-spectrum anxiety rainbow. "We have Gorton the Contemplative." Gorton resembled a philosophical slug who had achieved enlightenment and was now deeply regretting it. He moved with the speed of continental drift and spoke in a voice that suggested he had all the time in the universe to make his point. "The nature of survival," Gorton began slowly, "is not merely the continuation of biological processes but rather the fundamental question of what it truly means to exist in harmony with." "Yes, wonderful, very deep." Zephron cut him off. "Now, contestants, you'll be transported to a carefully selected wilderness planet where you'll compete for the ultimate prize: freedom, riches beyond imagination, and the admiration of trillions of viewers across the galaxy." Marcus raised his hand. "Quick question. What happens if we don't want to participate?" Zephron's laugh sounded like a garbage disposal trying to process cutlery. "Oh my dear human, you misunderstand. This isn't a request, this is entertainment. The show must go on." "Right," Marcus said, taking another bite of his sandwich. "And I'm guessing the legal department is conveniently located in another dimension." "Legal department?" Zephron looked genuinely confused. "Why would we need lawyers when we have ratings?" As the transport beam began to hum to life around them, Marcus caught a glimpse of what looked suspiciously like a betting pool on a nearby monitor. The odds were not in humanity's favor. In fact, they seemed to suggest that humans had roughly the same survival chances as a chocolate teapot in a volcano. "This should be interesting," Marcus muttered, finishing his sandwich just as the universe dissolved around him in a shower of sparkles and the distinct smell of cosmic bureaucracy. The wilderness planet, as it turned out, had apparently been designed by someone with a very loose interpretation of the word survivable. The landscape looked like Earth's angry cousin, who had gone through a rebellious phase, and never quite grown out of it. Purple grass stretched in all directions, punctuated by trees that seemed to have evolved specifically to be unhelpful, and rocks that were placed with the deliberate inconvenience of cosmic middle management. Marcus looked around at his fellow contestants, and immediately understood why the betting odds were so grim. Day 1 was shaping up to be what experts would later call a complete disaster with entertainment value. Krax had appointed himself team leader, which was going about as well as you'd expect from someone whose primary qualifications were being loud and having weapons for hands. He was currently trying to hunt something that looked like a cross between a chicken and a small motorcycle, using what could charitably be called the scream and charge method. "Stand still, prey creature," Krax bellowed, his claws clicking frantically as the chicken cycle thing zipped between his legs. "I am Krax the Destroyer. You will submit to my mighty. The creature promptly pecked him in what Marcus assumed was a sensitive area, based on the pitch of Krax's subsequent yelp. Meanwhile, Nimble had found a bush and was having what appeared to be a full-scale panic attack about its potential toxicity. Her fur was cycling through colors that didn't exist in most species' visual spectrum. What if it's poisonous? What if it's carnivorous? What if it's both? Do carnivorous plants eat herbivores differently than omnivores? What if I'm technically an omnivore, but the plant doesn't know that? Gordon, true to form, had found a comfortable rock and was contemplating the philosophical implications of their situation with the urgency of a glacier. The question we must ask ourselves, he intoned slowly, is not whether we can survive, but whether survival itself is merely an illusion created by our conscious perception of temporal continuity. Gordon, Marcus interrupted, it's going to be dark in about 3 hours, and none of us have shelter. Ah, but what is shelter really? But a physical manifestation of our psychological need to separate ourselves from the infinite cosmos. Marcus decided that trying to explain the concept of hypothermia to a philosophical slug would probably take longer than just building shelter himself. He spent the next few hours quietly observing, while his fellow contestants demonstrated exactly why their respective species had apparently never won this competition before. Krax continued his one-man war against the local wildlife with decreasing success and increasing volume. Nimble managed to work herself into such a state that she was now afraid of her own shadow, which was problematic since the planet had 2 suns, and therefore provided multiple shadows to fear. Gordon had progressed to questioning the fundamental nature of darkness itself. By nightfall, they had achieved exactly nothing except providing what Marcus suspected was premium entertainment for Zephron's audience. The temperature dropped with the enthusiasm of a lead balloon, and Marcus could practically hear the cosmic laugh track as 4 allegedly intelligent species huddled together in abject misery. Perhaps, Gordon mused through chattering teeth, the cold is simply the universe's way of reminding us that comfort is an arbitrary construct. Gordon, Marcus said patiently, if you don't stop philosophizing and start helping us not freeze to death, you're going to become a very enlightened popsicle. Krax, meanwhile, was attempting to assert dominance over the cold itself. I fear no temperature. My exoskeleton is forged in the fires of combat. His exoskeleton was, however, apparently not forged in the fires of basic thermodynamics, because he was shivering hard enough to register on seismic equipment. As Marcus lay there listening to his companions alternately chatter, panic, and pontificate their way through their first night, he began to suspect that Zephron might have severely underestimated exactly one member of this group. And it wasn't the warrior, the philosopher, or the anxiety-ridden herbivore. Day 2 dawned with all the subtlety of a cosmic slap in the face. Marcus woke up to find Krax trying to intimidate the sunrise, Nimble apologizing to a tree for existing near it, and Gordon apparently having achieved some sort of Zen state that looked suspiciously like unconsciousness. While his fellow contestants continued their impressive streak of survival incompetence, Marcus quietly wandered off to gather some dry grass and a few pieces of wood. Nothing fancy, just the kind of stuff that any human who'd ever been a Boy Scout, watched a survival show, or had a particularly boring camping trip would recognize as fire materials. He found a nice flat spot, arranged his tinder, and began the ancient human art of making 2 sticks extremely annoyed with each other. Within 20 minutes, he had a small but respectable fire crackling away. The effect on his companions was immediate and dramatic. Sorcery, Krax declared, pointing an accusatory claw at the flames. The human has summoned the fire spirits. Oh no, is it going to spread? Are we all going to burn? Should I run? Which direction is safe? Do fires have preferences for certain species? Fires have preferences for certain species. Nimble's fur was now cycling through what could only be described as full disco mode. Gordon, meanwhile, opened one eye with the slow majesty of a philosophical sunrise. Fire, he said thoughtfully, the eternal dance between destruction and creation, the physical manifestation of energy's desire to return to its primordial state. It's just friction, Marcus said, adding another stick to keep the flames going. You rub wood together really fast until it gets hot enough to ignite the tinder. The silence that followed was the kind of silence you get when you've just told a room full of people that their religion is actually a Tuesday afternoon hobby. Friction, Krax repeated slowly, as if the word might explode. Just rubbing things together, Nimble asked, her panic briefly overwhelmed by curiosity. Pretty much, humans have been doing it for, couple 100,000 years or so. By day 3, Marcus had added water purification to his repertoire. He'd found some clay deposits near a small stream, and fashioned a basic filter system, then boiled the water in a makeshift container he'd woven from some surprisingly cooperative plant fibers. But the real showstopper was the soap. Marcus had noticed that Krax was starting to develop a certain aroma that could charitably be described as biologically aggressive. So he collected some ash from his fire, mixed it with animal fat from Krax's less successful hunting attempts, and created what his grandmother would have recognized as good old-fashioned lye soap. "Behold," Marcus announced with mock grandeur, holding up a grayish lump. "The miracle of basic chemistry. What does it do?" Nimble asked, having overcome her initial fear of the mysterious human alchemy. "It makes things clean. Watch." Marcus demonstrated by washing his hands in the stream, the soap creating actual suds that seemed to fascinate his audience more than if he'd just performed actual magic. "Clean," Gordon mused. "An interesting concept. The removal of unwanted substances to achieve a state of perceived purity. But what defines unwanted? Is dirt not simply matter in an alternative location?" "Gordon," Marcus said patiently, "you smell like a philosophy textbook that's been marinating in a gym sock. That's what defines unwanted." From his hidden observation post, Zephron was having what could only be described as a complete meltdown. His feathers were ruffled in patterns that suggested extreme agitation, and his too white smile had been replaced by something that looked like cosmic constipation. "This isn't how it's supposed to work," he squawked to his production assistant, a nervous creature that looked like an anxious filing cabinet with eyes. "The human is supposed to be the first one eliminated. They're the weakest species. They don't even have natural weapons or armor." "Sir," the assistant ventured carefully, "the audience ratings are actually up 37% since the humans started the fire. Apparently viewers are fascinated by what they're calling primitive technology demonstrations." "Primitive technology?" Zephron's voice cracked. "It's cheating. There must be rules against making things work better." Meanwhile, back at camp, Marcus was enjoying the first hot meal any of them had eaten since arriving, courtesy of his fire and some basic cooking techniques. His fellow contestants were watching him with the kind of awe usually reserved for witnessing divine intervention. "Marcus," Nimble said hesitantly, "how do you know how to do all this?" Marcus shrugged, taking another bite of his reasonably edible dinner. "YouTube, mostly. And I went camping a few times as a kid. Plus human history. We've been making fire and soap and clean water for longer than we've had written language. It's kind of our thing." The cosmic implications of this statement would take several more days to fully sink in, but somewhere in the back of Zephron's increasingly panicked mind, a terrible thought was beginning to form. What if the primitive species wasn't actually primitive at all? By day 4, Marcus had what could generously be called a small industrial revolution going. While his fellow contestants were still figuring out which end of a stick was pointy, Marcus had progressed to what anthropologists would recognize as late Stone Age with attitude. He'd constructed a lean-to shelter that actually kept the rain out. Unlike Krax's intimidation fortress, which was basically just him standing very still and hoping the weather would be impressed by his exoskeleton, Marcus had woven waterproof panels from local plant fibers using a technique he'd learned from a documentary about Pacific Islander traditional crafts. The shelter was angled to catch rainwater, which fed into his expanded filtration system that now included multiple stages of purification. "How did you know to angle it like that?" Nimble asked, her anxiety colors finally settling into something resembling curious yellow-green. "Physics," Marcus replied, adjusting a support beam. "Water flows downhill. Shelter should work with gravity, not against it. Plus you want to catch and direct rainwater for collection, not just let it run off uselessly." Krax examined the structure with the intensity of a warrior studying enemy fortifications. "This construction could withstand a moderate siege," he admitted grudgingly, "though it lacks proper defensive spikes." "That's because it's a shelter, not a bunker, Krax. All shelters are bunkers if you have the right attitude." By day 5, Marcus had moved on to food preservation and hunting technology. He'd built several different types of traps using nothing more than sticks, stones and plant fibers. The deadfall trap was catching those chicken cycle creatures regularly. The fish weir in the stream was providing a steady protein source, and his smoking rack was turning excess meat into jerky that would last for weeks. Gordon observed the smoking process with the fascination of someone watching the universe rearrange itself. "You are transforming the fundamental nature of organic matter through controlled application of heat and chemical compounds present in combustion byproducts. I'm making bacon that won't go bad," Marcus translated. "Bacon that transcends the temporal limitations of biological decay." Gordon corrected with philosophical satisfaction. Sure, Gordon. Whatever gets you through the existential crisis. Meanwhile, in the producer's booth, Zephron was discovering that panic came in many exciting flavors. Today's special was desperate confusion with notes of cosmic humiliation. The audience numbers, sir, his assistant reported nervously. They're unprecedented. How unprecedented? We're getting viewer requests from species that don't even have entertainment as a concept. The crystalline hive mind of Proxima 7 just asked if they can subscribe to human survival techniques weekly. The void dwellers want to know if the human offers consulting services. Zephron's feathers were now cycling through colors that didn't exist in any known spectrum. This is supposed to be entertainment, not educational programming. Sir, the betting pools have collapsed. No one's wagering on the human failing anymore. They're betting on what he'll invent next. On day 6, Marcus introduced his fellow contestants to the concept of division of labor, which was apparently a revolutionary idea in certain corners of the galaxy. He'd noticed that Nimble was actually quite good at identifying edible versus poisonous plants once her anxiety was channeled into useful paranoia. See, you're naturally cautious about new things, Marcus explained as he showed her how to test plant safety systematically. That's not a bug, it's a feature. Cautious foragers live longer than bold ones. Nimble's fur brightened to something approaching confidence adjacent. So my constant worry about everything is actually useful. Extremely useful. You've identified 7 different edible root vegetables, and 3 medicinal plants just today. Krax would have eaten the first thing he found and hoped his warrior constitution could handle the toxins. I heard that. Krax called from where he was practicing combat maneuvers against a tree that was winning. It wasn't supposed to be subtle. Marcus had also figured out how to channel Gordon's philosophical tendencies into practical applications. The slug-like creature turned out to have an excellent memory for complex processes once you framed them in terms of universal principles. Consider the fish trap, Marcus suggested. It's a physical manifestation of the philosophical concept of inevitability. The fish's desire to explore leads to its capture, which feeds our desire to survive, which allows us to continue contemplating existence. Fascinating, Gordon mused, his slow brain actually speeding up with interest. A closed loop of cause and effect that transcends individual agency while serving collective necessity. Exactly. Want to help me build a better one? Even Krax had found his niche. While his hunting techniques were more enthusiastic than effective, he was excellent at heavy construction work and had the kind of territorial instincts that made him a natural camp guard. I shall defend our fortress against all who would challenge our supremacy, Krax declared, striking a pose atop Marcus's latest creation, a watchtower made from lashed-together poles that provided an excellent view of the surrounding area. It's not a fortress, it's a lookout post, Marcus corrected. All lookout posts are fortress beginnings if you have vision. By day 7, their camp had evolved into something that would have made early human settlements look primitive. Marcus had built a workshop area with organized tool storage, a kitchen space with multiple cooking surfaces, a food preparation area with running water courtesy of an elevated aqueduct system, and even a primitive but functional latrine system located downhill and downwind from everything else. The other contestants were no longer just surviving, they were thriving, and more importantly, they were learning. In the producer's booth, Zephron was now experiencing what could only be described as existential professional crisis with overtones of species-wide embarrassment. Sir, his assistant whispered, we're getting calls from the Galactic Education Council. They want to know if we can license the humans' techniques for their survival curriculum. License? Zephron's voice had reached frequencies that could shatter crystal. And sir, the betting pools have shifted again. They're now wagering on whether the human will achieve spaceflight before the 30 days are up. Zephron stared at the monitors showing Marcus calmly explaining gear ratios to Gordon while Nimble organized medicinal herbs and Krax practiced what appeared to be formation fighting with imaginary enemies. This was supposed to be a simple survival competition, he whispered to himself. How did it become, whatever this is? On the screens Marcus was sketching plans in the dirt for what looked suspiciously like a water-powered mill wheel. Sir, the assistant ventured. Should we perhaps add some additional challenges to make things more difficult? Zephron's laugh sounded like a garbage disposal having an existential crisis. Add challenges? He's turning our survival game into a civilization simulator. What's next? He builds a university. As if on cue, Marcus's voice drifted from the speakers. Okay everyone, tomorrow we're going to work on pottery. Gordon, I think you'll find the philosophical implications of transforming Earth through fire absolutely fascinating. Zephron's head hit his desk with a sound that echoed through several dimensions. Days 8 through 15 became what galactic historians would later refer to as the Great Humbling, or in more colloquial terms, the week everything we thought we knew about primitive species got thrown out the nearest airlock. Marcus had entered what could only be described as his infrastructure phase. By day 8 he'd completed the pottery kiln that Gorton had helped design after a 6-hour philosophical discussion about the transformative nature of earth and fire. The kiln wasn't just functional, it was a masterpiece of thermal engineering that maintained consistent temperatures through a series of air channels and heat retention chambers. The clay becomes ceramic through molecular restructuring under controlled thermal stress, Gorton explained to the increasingly bewildered camera crew, his usual glacial pace replaced by something approaching enthusiasm. It's a metaphor for consciousness itself, raw material transformed through experience into something more durable and useful. It's also really good for making bowls, Marcus added, pulling out a perfectly formed water vessel that was both functional and aesthetically pleasing. Nimble, want to help me glaze these? I found some minerals that should give us some nice colors. Nimble, whose anxiety had transformed into what could only be called productive paranoia, had become the camp's master chemist and pharmacist. She'd cataloged over 50 different plants, created a comprehensive map of their properties, and developed what amounted to a primitive but effective medical system. This bark extract reduces inflammation, she explained, carefully measuring doses into Marcus's ceramic containers. This root helps with digestion, and this leaf can be used to clean wounds. Oh, and Marcus, I found 3 different plants that can be used to make dyes, and 2 that produce soap-like compounds when processed correctly. Nimble, you're a genius. Her fur shifted to a color that could only be described as bashful pride with undertones of scientific satisfaction. Krax, meanwhile, had evolved from a mindless warrior into something resembling a strategic defense coordinator. Marcus had introduced him to the concept of defensive architecture, and Krax had taken to it with the enthusiasm of someone discovering their true calling. Krax announced from atop the camp's newest addition, a sophisticated early warning system consisting of strategically placed mirrors and reflective surfaces that could signal the approach of potential threats from any direction. Our fortress can now detect enemies at a distance of 3 kilometers. It's not a fortress, Krax. All settlements are fortresses if you think defensively enough. But the real breakthrough came on day 10, when Marcus introduced the concept of mechanical advantage through simple machines. Using principles that any human high school physics student would recognize, he'd constructed a system of levers, pulleys, and inclined planes that allowed his team to move massive stones and construct increasingly sophisticated buildings. The workshop had become a proper manufacturing center, complete with organized tool storage, multiple workstations, and what appeared to be the galaxy's first primitive assembly line. Marcus had Gorton contemplating the philosophical implications of standardized parts while Nimble quality tested each component with scientific rigor, and Krax provided the muscle for heavy construction. Mass production through specialization, Marcus explained to his increasingly dumbfounded audience. Each person focuses on what they're best at, which increases both efficiency and quality. It's not rocket science. In the producer's booth, Zephron was discovering that nervous breakdown came in many exciting varieties. Today's special was complete professional identity crisis with a side of species-wide embarrassment. Sir, his assistant reported, its filing cabinet-like form trembling with barely contained panic. The Galactic Engineering Guild has submitted a formal request to observe the humans' construction techniques. They're calling it unprecedented innovation in resource-limited environments. Innovation, Zephron's voice had reached pitches that existed only in theoretical physics. It's supposed to be primitive survival. Also, sir, the Academy of Xenobiology wants to reclassify humans as a Category 7 intelligent species. Category 7, that's the same level as the crystalline hive mind. Yes, sir, based on what they're calling demonstrated capacity for rapid technological development and adaptive problem-solving in novel environments. On day 12, Marcus achieved what the galaxy would later recognize as a fundamental shift in the nature of the competition. He built a water-powered mill. The mill wasn't just functional, it was a testament to human engineering ingenuity. Using a carefully designed system of wooden gears, axles, and grinding stones, Marcus had created a machine that could process grain, crush minerals for pigments, and even power a primitive bellows system for metallurgy. It's all about transferring rotational energy, Marcus explained cheerfully while his contraption hummed along, processing seeds into flour with mechanical precision. The water wheel captures kinetic energy from the flowing stream and converts it into useful work through a series of gear ratios. Gorton was practically vibrating with philosophical excitement, which for a slug-like creature was quite a feat. You've created a closed-loop system that harnesses the eternal flow of natural forces to serve conscious purpose. It's a physical manifestation of harmony between intention and reality. Plus it makes really good flour, Marcus added. By day 13, their camp had become what could only be described as a functioning village. Marcus had introduced the concept of urban planning, creating designated areas for different activities. Residential zones with comfortable sleeping quarters for each species' specific needs, industrial areas for manufacturing and food processing, agricultural zones where Nimble's expertise in botany had created what amounted to a managed ecosystem, and even recreational spaces where cracks could practice combat techniques without accidentally destroying vital infrastructure. The other contestants weren't just learning, they were teaching each other. Nimble had started cross-training Gorton in botanical identification, while Cracks was teaching both of them basic defensive strategies. They'd developed their own communication systems, established work schedules, and even created what appeared to be a primitive but effective system of resource allocation. "It's like watching evolution in fast forward," whispered one of the camera crew members. "It's like watching our entire understanding of technological development get rewritten in real time," another replied. On day 14, Marcus casually revolutionized metallurgy by introducing the concept of controlled atmosphere smelting. Using his bellows system and carefully designed furnace, he'd begun producing what could only be described as primitive but functional metal tools. "The key is controlling the oxygen content during the heating process," he explained, while demonstrating proper forge technique to his fascinated audience. "Too much oxygen and you get brittle metal, too little and it doesn't heat properly. But get it just right, and you can create alloys that are stronger than either component separately." The metal knife he produced wasn't just sharp, it was a work of art that would have impressed Bronze Age craftsmen across the galaxy. In the producer's booth, Zephron had progressed through denial, anger, bargaining and depression, and was now approaching what could only be described as cosmic acceptance with overtones of professional resignation. "Sir," his assistant reported with the air of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis, "the viewing numbers have broken all previous records. We're being broadcast in 17 different dimensions, and the Emperor of the Andromeda Collective has personally requested a copy of the human's complete technical specifications." Technical specifications. They want to hire him as a consultant for their planetary colonization program. On day 15, Marcus dropped what would later be known as the revelation that changed everything. He was teaching Nimble how to create paper from plant fibers when she asked the question that had been building in everyone's minds. "Marcus," she said carefully, "how does one human know so much about everything?" Marcus paused in his demonstration of proper pulp preparation, and looked around at his companions, Cracks practicing formation fighting with his imaginary army, Gorton contemplating the philosophical implications of written language, and Nimble organizing her ever-expanding collection of scientific observations. "You want to know the really funny part?" Marcus said with a grin that would have worried anyone who knew humans well. "Most of this stuff, I learned it from YouTube videos during boring weekends. Some of it I picked up from camping trips with my dad when I was 12. The metallurgy came from a documentary I watched about medieval blacksmithing. The engineering principles are basically high school physics." The silence that followed was the kind of silence you get when the fundamental assumptions underlying your entire worldview suddenly reveal themselves to be made of tissue paper and wishful thinking. "YouTube?" Nimble asked faintly. "It's this thing where humans share knowledge videos. Millions of them. Everything from how to change a tire to how to build a nuclear reactor. Most humans know at least some of this stuff, because we find it interesting, or because we were bored one weekend, or because our parents thought it would be character building. Most humans," Cracks repeated slowly, "possess this knowledge." "Well, yeah, I mean I'm pretty average. There are humans who could have built a steam engine by now. There are probably humans who could have figured out gunpowder. And there are definitely humans who could have established sustainable agriculture and started breeding programs for livestock improvement." The cosmic implications of this statement hit the galactic audience with the force of a collapsing star. Somewhere in the depths of space, entire civilizations were having what could only be described as existential species crisis with overtones of technological inadequacy. In the producer's booth, Zephron made a sound that was part laugh, part sob, and part the dying gasp of his professional dignity. "So what you're telling me," he said to his assistant, "is that we've been calling the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy primitive because they voluntarily live without technology for fun." "It appears so, sir, and they've been letting us think they were inferior because they found it amusing." "That seems to be the case, sir." Zephron looked at his monitors, where Marcus was now sketching plans for what appeared to be a printing press while casually explaining the historical impact of mass communication on human civilization. "I think," Zephron said slowly, We may have made a slight miscalculation. The final 15 days of what had originally been conceived as a primitive survival challenge became what galactic anthropologists would later term the Great Revelation, or more colloquially among younger species, the time humans accidentally conquered entertainment by being themselves. By day 16, Marcus had moved beyond infrastructure and into what could only be described as early industrial revolution with a side of social engineering. The printing press he'd sketched was now a reality, churning out copies of what he'd modestly titled Basic Survival Techniques for Galactic Species, but which was already being hailed across 17 dimensions as the most important technological manual ever created. The beautiful thing about movable type, Marcus explained while adjusting the press mechanism, is that it democratizes information. Instead of knowledge being limited to whoever can memorize it or hand copy it, you can mass-produce books and distribute knowledge to everyone. Gorton was having what could only be described as a philosophical orgasm. You've created a system for replicating consciousness itself. Ideas can now transcend the biological limitations of individual memory and achieve a form of immortality through mechanical reproduction. Plus, Marcus added, pulling a crisp page from the press, I can finally make instruction manuals with diagrams. Cracks, this should help with your fortress, defensive perimeter construction. The instruction manual Marcus handed over contained detailed engineering diagrams, step-by-step construction guides, and what appeared to be the galaxy's first comprehensive treatise on defensive architecture written in simple, easy-to-understand language with helpful illustrations. Cracks studied the manual with the intensity of a scholar discovering the secrets of the universe. This contains the wisdom of 1,000 battles, the strategic principles, the engineering specifications, the tactical advantages of elevated positions and overlapping fields of fire. It's mostly just common sense about sightlines and structural integrity, but sure, by day 18, their settlement had evolved into something that would have impressed city planners from any advanced civilization. Marcus had introduced the concept of zoning laws, created a waste management system that would have made environmental engineers weep with joy, and established what appeared to be the galaxy's first functional democracy. So we vote on decisions that affect everyone, Marcus explained during their daily community meeting, but individual expertise gets weighted appropriately. Nimble has final say on anything medical or botanical, Cracks handles security and construction, Gorton tackles long-term planning and philosophical implications, and I handle technical implementation. A distributed leadership model based on competency rather than arbitrary hierarchy. Gorton mused with satisfaction. It's a political system that acknowledges the multifaceted nature of collective decision-making while respecting individual expertise. It's also just basic teamwork. But yeah, the community meetings had become must-watch entertainment across the galaxy, not because of drama or conflict, but because they were watching 4 completely different species create a functional society from scratch in real time, using principles that most advanced civilizations had never even considered. Meanwhile, in the producer's booth, Zephron had progressed beyond nervous breakdown into what could only be described as existential professional evolution. He was no longer trying to salvage his survival show. He was trying to figure out how to patent whatever Marcus was doing and sell it as a franchise. Sir, his assistant reported, we've received formal requests from 47 different planetary governments asking for consultation on colonial development programs. The Andromedan Empire is offering to buy exclusive rights to the humans' techniques for their entire star system. How much are they offering? More than the GDP of most solar systems, sir, and the viewing numbers. We've broken every record in galactic broadcasting history. The show is being translated into 3,000 languages, including 17 that don't technically exist yet. We've got species creating new forms of mathematics just to better understand the humans' engineering principles. On day 20, Marcus achieved what would later be recognized as the moment when everything changed forever. He didn't just create a water-powered textile mill. He created a production facility that could manufacture standardized clothing, rope, paper, and what appeared to be the galaxy's first mass-produced books. Industrial standardization, Marcus explained cheerfully while his machines hummed with efficient precision, means you can create identical products at scale. Instead of each person making their own tools or clothes, specialists can produce high-quality items that everyone can use. The implications hit the galactic audience like a supernova. Most advanced species had never moved beyond artisanal production methods because they'd never conceived of standardization as a concept. They were watching a single human accidentally invent mass production using nothing more than wood, stone, water, and what he cheerfully described as basic engineering principles. Nimble had become the settlement's chief scientist and was conducting what appeared to be the galaxy's first systematic study of xenobotany. Her research notes, reproduced on Marcus's printing press, were already being hailed as groundbreaking contributions to universal biological science. Fascinating, she murmured while examining a plant specimen under a microscope Marcus had constructed from carefully ground glass lenses. This species appears to have developed a symbiotic relationship with 3 different types of beneficial fungi. The applications for agriculture could be revolutionary. Want to help me design a crop rotation system? Marcus asked. I think we can increase food production by about 300% while actually improving soil quality. 300%, her fur shifted to colors that didn't exist in nature. How is that possible? Nitrogen fixation, companion planting, integrated pest management, and what my grandmother called working with nature instead of against it. It's not complicated, just systematic. Krax had evolved from a simple warrior into what could only be described as a strategic defense genius. Using Marcus's engineering principles and his own instinctive understanding of tactical advantages, he'd created a defensive system that was being studied by military academies across 17 different species. The key insight, Krax explained to his increasingly impressed audience, is that defense is not merely about stopping attacks, but about controlling movement, information and resources. Marcus taught me that every defensive position should serve multiple purposes, and that the strongest fortress is one that appears peaceful until it demonstrates otherwise. I mostly just showed you how to build good walls and use geography effectively. Marcus protested. You taught me to think strategically, instead of merely reacting aggressively. This is the difference between a warrior and a general. By day 22, their settlement had attracted what could only be described as interested observers. The show's production crew had been quietly joined by representatives from the Galactic Engineering Guild, the Academy of Xenobiology, the Universal Institute of Social Sciences, and what appeared to be the galaxy's equivalent of the United Nations. They're not here officially, Zephron explained to his increasingly nervous investors, but apparently there's considerable interest in establishing formal diplomatic relations with the human settlement. Diplomatic relations? It's a survival show. Sir, I don't think it's a survival show anymore. I think it's become something else entirely. On day 25, Marcus dropped what would later be known as the final revelation. He was demonstrating the principles of crop breeding and selective agriculture when Gorton asked the question that had been bothering all of them. Marcus, Gorton said slowly, your species obviously possesses knowledge that surpasses most galactic civilizations. Why do you still live on a single planet? Why haven't you established a galactic empire? Marcus paused in his explanation of hybrid seed development and looked thoughtful. Well, mostly because we're still figuring out how to get along with each other. What's the point of conquering the galaxy if you can't even prevent wars on your own planet? Plus, we kind of like having challenges. Life gets boring when everything's too easy. So humans voluntarily limit their technological development. Not limit, exactly. More like, we prefer to take our time and do things right. We could probably build faster than light ships if we really wanted to, but we're still working on making sure we're the kind of species that should have faster than light ships, you know. The silence that followed this revelation was the kind of silence you get when you realize that the species you've been condescending to has been voluntarily restraining itself out of ethical considerations you hadn't even imagined. Also, Marcus added with a grin that would haunt galactic philosophers for generations, it's more fun this way. If we just showed up with advanced technology, everyone would either worship us or try to kill us. But if we show up with nothing and build everything from scratch, we make friends and everyone learns something useful. On day 28, Zephron made the announcement that would change galactic entertainment forever. Ladies, gentlemen, and various forms of sentient energy, he declared to his record-breaking audience, I am proud to announce that Marcus Rivera has not only won the ultimate primitive challenge, but he has redefined what we mean by victory itself. The settlement behind him was no longer recognizable as a survival camp. It was a thriving community, with functional infrastructure, sustainable agriculture, manufacturing capabilities, and what appeared to be the galaxy's first successful interspecies cooperative democracy. More importantly, Zephron continued, his voice carrying the weight of cosmic significance, Marcus has graciously agreed to share his knowledge with any species interested in what he calls practical civilization building techniques. Marcus stepped forward, looking slightly embarrassed by all the attention. It's really not that complicated, he said. Most of this stuff is just common sense applied systematically. The main thing is remembering that technology should serve people, not the other way around. Marcus has also agreed, Zephron announced with the air of someone delivering the most important news in galactic history, to establish what he's calling the Human Practical Education Initiative, where humans will travel to other worlds to teach these techniques to any species interested in learning. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Applications poured in from across the galaxy, from civilizations that had never before admitted they might have something to learn from other species. On day 30, as Marcus packed his few possessions and prepared to return to what he still thought of as his normal life, he was approached by his 3 companions. "Marcus," Nimble said, her fur cycling through what could only be described as grateful rainbow with undertones of scientific excitement, "we've been talking, and we'd like to come with you. To learn more about human civilization, and maybe help teach other species what we've learned here. You want to come to Earth. We want to understand how a species that can build all this chooses to live simply," Gorton explained. "It's the most profound philosophical question any of us have ever encountered." Plus Krax added, "I want to see what a real human fortress looks like. You keep talking about these castles and fortifications that your ancestors built." Marcus looked around at the settlement they'd built together, then back at his unlikely friends. "You know what? I think my boss is going to have some interesting questions about why I've been gone for a month, but sure. Welcome to Earth, guys. Just, maybe don't mention the part about humans being accidentally more advanced than most galactic civilizations. We're still kind of figuring that out ourselves." As their transport ship prepared for departure, Zephron made one final announcement to his audience, and that, beings of the galaxy, concludes our ultimate primitive challenge. Though as we've learned, the only thing primitive about it was our understanding of what it means to be truly civilized. The show had started as entertainment and ended as education. It had begun with the assumption that humans were the weakest species and concluded with the recognition that they might just be the wisest. And somewhere in a small office building on Earth, Marcus's boss was wondering why his most reliable employee had been marked as absent due to cosmic significance for the past month, and whether that was really a valid excuse under company policy. But that, as they say, is another story entirely.